Now, Mark Barega from Microsoft, being very patient. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Maura. I was patient, but I'll also hopefully be quick. One of the points of inviting you all today was to show you the diverse coalition that we've pulled together, and I think that's been evident already. We have representatives from rural America, representatives of education causes of the inner city. We have Google and Microsoft here together holding hands. I didn't actually hold Larry's hands, but it was a virtual embrace. So put that in your sub-headline in the stories that you write, please. If not, in bold print. A couple of the folks in the Alliance that I'd really encourage you to spend some time with over here on this wall: Shared Spectrum and Motorola. Shared Spectrum mentioned that they do work for the DoD. They didn't elaborate on what that work is. But basically, the DoD has come to the recognition that when they go into a country, they don't necessarily want to annihilate all radio communications capabilities in that country. There's value in a society maintaining its existing communications infrastructure. So what does the DoD need to do? The DoD needs to operate securely without interfering with existing communication systems. That's what Shared Spectrum is working on for the DoD. And if it can work for the DoD so that our soldiers can talk to our soldiers without interfering with, Iraqi national broadcasters, then it ought to be able to work here. And that's an amazing American innovation story. We also have here in our coalition Motorola. Motorola, for decades upon decades, has been the premier radio manufacturer for the United States. They manufacture cellular phones, they manufacture communications devices of all types, and they are here in this coalition saying that it can be done. So when you do the balancing of, whose engineers are saying what versus the other folks' engineers, think deeply about what Motorola is saying and what Shared Spectrum has been able to demonstrate. My role today is to point out that in the last 18 months or so, we've seen another sector from the communications community pop up and take an adverse position to using the white spaces on an unlicensed basis. And it turns out that's the cellular industry. And it really, when these guys started to show up in the press and on the Hill and wherever else, I was baffled. Like Larry, I've got my smartphone here. My smartphone has Bluetooth. Bluetooth is unlicensed. It means I can communicate from here on my mouthpiece down to my device. Bluetooth reaches about 3 feet. My phone has Wi-Fi, which means that if there were a Wi-Fi access point in this room, I could find it. If there were a Wi-Fi access point, however, in the other room, I could not find it. I could not find it because the walls in this building are so thick. And as one gentleman said earlier, they may contain asbestos. So there's no way for me to get from this room to the next room with traditional Wi-Fi. That's where white spaces is different. White spaces can carry through multiple walls. That's why it will be cheaper to wire this building via white spaces, cheaper to wire an inner city school, public housing with white space spectrum. That's why it'll be easier to serve the mountains in North Carolina. And so I thought to myself, gee, these cell phone guys, they ought to get it. They got Bluetooth on the handset, they've got Wi-Fi on the handset, they ought to enjoy white spaces on the handset as well. In fact, if anybody across the nation, as a major business operation is going to take advantage of the white spaces, it ought to be the cellular guys. They run the networks in the back, they're all about wireless connectivity, they know how to do it in multiple bands. And yet here they stand up opposed to the allocation. And then I had an epiphany, and it was thanks to CTIA itself, actually, that invited me to speak at an event a few weeks back in San Francisco. And on the stage was a rural wireless provider. And he was saying he needs access to the white spaces because he cannot get point-to-point microwave spectrum to allow him to backhaul his internet traffic. And I thought, I still was confused. Because point-to-point microwave, typically in this country, is widely available and is also used way up in the nosebleed section of the spectrum. 5.9 gigahertz, 5.8 gigahertz, 39 gigahertz. In fact, to create spectrum for cell phones a decade or so ago, the FCC pushed microwave operations out of lower bands and up into these higher bands, and it's worked out quite well. So still, I'm confused. Why the backhaul problem? In Seattle, I get wireless internet, and my provider uses backhaul that's also wireless, up in the 5.9 gig range, up in the 37, 39 gig range. So again, why the problem? Well, it turns out, according to this cellular provider from rural America, or this wireless provider, there is a glut of spectrum in rural America. There is I'll repeat it because it was his word, there is a glut of spectrum in rural America. The problem is, as a gentleman from North Carolina pointed out, it's effectively being warehoused. The big providers are not making use of the spectrum in rural areas that they've acquired, so it just sits there. Another problem that this wireless upstart has in rural America is that when he goes to his local phone company and says, I want you to provide me backhaul, he's actually going to his competitor. And his competitor is saying, I provide internet service, you want to come into my territory and provide internet service, but you need my backhaul? Let me think hard about the price I'm going to charge you. And so it isn't as if the local phone company lacks backhaul access. It's just that the new upstart company in this rural part of America is getting extorted. And so there's a glut of spectrum, and there is, you can call it market failure in the rural area. And so what then has the cellular industry decided to do? Instead of taking care of their own situation with their glut of spectrum, they've said, let's go after the white spaces. Again, the white spaces are great for penetrating walls, for going through foliage, for going around mountains. The FCC said that the lower bands are great for mobility, and they pushed microwave, these point-to-point connections used for backhaul, up higher in the spectrum. FCC policy is not to put point-to-point microwave or backhaul low in the spectrum, yet that's what the cellular industry wants to do, simply because they can't get their own house in order. So I'd ask you to think about those two things. I'd ask you to look at the alliance that is here, the many different faces that it represents, the technologists that have done their homework, and then probe more deeply into the claims of folks who've recently come to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And finally, batting cleanup on our panel, he's our cool stuff guy. Niraj, and I'm going to mess it up, but let me try it, Srivastava. Close. Tava from Dell, who really is quite eloquent in explaining what this means to everyday people. We hear so much about the public policy issues and digital divide issues that white spaces will solve, but it also has the benefit of being able to deliver us a lot of cool stuff too. So without further ado, Niraj, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I want to talk from the Dell perspective a little bit about innovation in white spaces, because that's the reason Dell is so excited about getting the white spaces and being able to deliver applications to millions of U.S. citizens around the country. And the opportunities for innovations here, we think, are dramatic. And the innovations are in three different areas. They start with innovation in government, they move to innovation in industry, and ultimately yield innovation for consumers. And to understand how this innovation is going to arrive, it's instructive to look backwards just a little bit at what happened in unlicensed and 2.4 gigahertz. You may have heard, somewhere along the line, the concept of white spaces is Wi-Fi on steroids. And that isn't just a marketing slogan. It actually represents a good way to think about how innovation happens. So if you think back in history, in 1985, the FCC made a decision to allow unlicensed devices in 2.4 gigahertz. And that decision was not carried on the front page of any paper anywhere. It was very well little known. And for a long time, industry didn't know how to go take advantage of that. Because, as Larry Page said, that was considered junk spectrum. 2.4 gigahertz had a lot of interference from lots of places, including wireless microwave ovens. But industry slowly over time figured out how to take advantage of that spectrum and put it to use. So a couple of different things happened. One, folks at Ericsson developed a technology called Bluetooth, which developed into the Bluetooth SIG in 1994. And then the IEEE, a group of engineers in the industry, developed something they called the 802.11b, which we call more colloquially Wi-Fi. And that arrived in 98, 99. So if you think from 85 to 1998, 1999, there was a period of, you would have said, where's the innovation? But once that happened, look at what happened since then. From 1988, from Wi-Fi started, and then Bluetooth in 94 to where we are today. As Larry mentioned, we have well over 1 billion devices unlicensed shipping every year into 2.4 gigahertz. The thing I want you to think about most and remember is there are now more people using unlicensed 2.4 gigahertz spectrum around the globe than any other spectrum on the planet. Any other spectrum on the planet. That's powerful. And how did that happen? It happened because of innovation. The FCC in 1985 made an innovative decision. It said, we're going to take a leap and allow unlicensed devices in 2.4 gigahertz. They had never done that before in any other spectrum. And oh, by the way, no other government anywhere else had done that. It was a leap. It was innovative at the time. And that innovation was so powerful that over 120 other countries around the world had now adopted the FCC rules. That's why Wi-Fi is global. That's why you can take your Dell laptop, any one of those 120 countries, turn it on, probably find a hotspot, and off you're running. That was innovation in government. And that's the opportunity we have today in front of the FCC here in 2008 to be innovative again for a second time and be the first country to authorize white spaces. We will not be the only country. The UK is looking to authorize white spaces in the UK, and the European Union is looking at it as well. And so we need to be the innovators and the first movers and go make that happen. And the result of the innovation in government yields innovation in industry and then innovation with consumers. So you think about innovation in industry. The folks who made the decision in 1985 had no idea, ultimately, what would come out of it. And as I sit here today, I can peer into my crystal ball, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the cool, innovative things you can do with white spaces, but there'll be some guy standing here 10 years from now that will be talking about things that I can't even dream of, nor anybody in this room today. Because in 1985, there was not an engineer on the planet that would have said Wi-Fi is what's going to come out of the FCC ruling. Not an engineer on the planet that would have said Bluetooth is what's going to come out of it. Not an engineer on the planet that would have said toys some days will have 2.4 gigahertz radios in them. So as we sit here today, think about the innovation that happened out of unlicensed 2.4 gigahertz. The unlicensed spectrum yielded laptops that are mobile, cordless phones. We have cameras that have 2.4 gigahertz radios in them. We have cell phones that have 2.4 gigahertz radios in them. We have portable video games, Nintendo DS, PlayStation Portable types of things. We have home video game systems, PlayStation 3, Nintendo Wii, right? We have toys that have unlicensed 2.4 gigahertz radios in them. So, like I said, the number of unlicensed innovations and applications that grew out of the 1985 decision today is enormous. And the value to the U.S. economy is huge. In fact, it's in the hundreds of billions of dollars, worth more than any other spectrum we've ever sold to anybody else. So here's an opportunity for the U.S. government to take a little more unlicensed spectrum and make it valuable. A chance to be innovative again like we were in 1985. That's the opportunity in front of us. Now, what will we do with that innovation? Let's assume the FCC makes the good decision by the election, as Larry said, we authorize white spaces operation. How does industry innovate after that? And what happens with consumers? So for industry, the great thing is we are poised to start investing immediately, as Larry said, hundreds of millions of dollars. When Wi-Fi was off, when 2.4 gigahertz went unlicensed, no one quite knew what to do with it. So it took almost a decade before we got around as industry to really innovating. That's not going to happen this time. The one bold prediction I can make with 100% confidence, there's no decade gap this time. We are ready at Dell and sister companies that are all working with us are all ready to start innovating immediately. Okay? And there are startups. There are startups that are already part of the proceedings with the FCC, and there are other startups that are ready, as soon as the FCC decision drops, to start working on different technologies and different innovation that comes here. So I'll give you just a sample of things we've thought about at Dell, and there'll be many, many more, but just give you a flavor for what sorts of things can happen. So today we use 2.4 gigahertz for unlicensed in our home. And we use it to do internet and email, and we're all very happy that we have it, and it makes our lives wonderful. But there are things we can't do yet. We can do email well, we can do internet browsing. We don't do audio, we don't do video. Audio is one of those things that today, you gotta have wires to every speaker that you put in the house. And the one thing all our customer research at Dell has always told us is customers hate wires. I have not yet met the customer who says, I like wires. They prefer wireless. So wires and audio and television are the same sorts of things. You never have the right cable, it's never the right length, getting it from one place to another, going upstairs, going downstairs, going outside, always a problem. White spaces for us at Dell solves that problem beautifully. We are believers we can deliver to our consumers here in the US whole home audio and video solutions. So you will be able to take SD and high definition audio as well as video, stream it throughout your house, upstairs, downstairs, basement, outside, wherever you want that to go. So that will be on top of already the internet and email kinds of things you employ today. So we think that's pretty powerful because that's going to enable new kinds of usage models for people. You can't today do telecommuting from home because video conferencing at home doesn't work well. But with white spaces, we'll take video conferencing at home and turn that into something you can really do. If you want to do telemedicine from home, you want to do education from home, you need video, you need the audio piece. You can't do that with the spectrum we have today. Unlicensed white spaces gives us that. Those are the kinds of things that we get really excited about. People have talked about the rural part, and we're excited about that as well. We think white spaces in rural are, one of those perfect marriages. There will be campuses and cities and so forth that network themselves that allow people to have access that they don't have today. We're also believers in we're going to change the nature of networking with white spaces. Now, what do I mean by change the nature? Today, if you've ever set up a network at home, it's a complicated proposition. You have to know things about IP addresses and DNS servers and all kinds of things. And if you're me, that's all pretty easy to understand. But for the average consumer, we find that's hard. So we intend to change the dynamic nature of networking. We're going to make it simple. You take the devices, you bring them close together, they self-discover. They self-arrange themselves in a network, identify themselves, set up the security, and off you're running. Okay? That's where the industry is going to innovate next. We're going to make networking completely seamless for people. That's what white spaces gives us. It's new ground, new technologies. We're going to take a lot of stuff that we've been working on in the lab are going to show up in white spaces. And without that, they're just going to sit in the lab. They'll show up first in the UK. They won't show up in the US. That would be a shame. So we're excited about new technologies to make networking completely seamless and simple, so you don't have to be an engineering expert to go figure it out. We're going to take mesh networking, which is a concept you've probably read about, heard about for years, but we haven't truly delivered it anywhere. That's something we can deliver with white spaces. Networks that connect themselves together, and if one part of it goes away, the rest of the network continues to operate. Think of how powerful that will be in natural disaster kinds of situations. None of the networks that we have today have that kind of redundancy, have that kind of self-repair mechanism. Those are things we're going to deliver with white spaces. Congressman Inslee mentioned energy efficiency. And believe it or not, white spaces will get used to help with energy efficiency as well. One of the efforts that's underway in unlicensed 2.4 gigahertz is something called Zigbee, home automation and control. So we have unlicensed 2.4 gigahertz radios in laptops and cell phones, et cetera, but guess what? People are trying to put 2.4 gigahertz radios into your washer dryer. into your, you know, water heater, into any home appliance, into the central air conditioning and heating system itself. Okay? We think with white spaces, we're going to put those devices and all of those things, we're going to put it in your car. We're going to be able to monitor the energy uses of any device you have, and if the United States steps up to build a smart grid system, okay, then we can be able to tell the grid, here's what energy uses we need as a house, as individual devices, and that'll make us all a lot more efficient. So that's an area that we actually think can really happen. It's not 50 years in the future. It's not even 10 years in the future. We have that technology today. It was originally being developed for unlicensed 2.4, but with unlicensed white spaces, it'll become a reality that much sooner. So there are lots of applications, and I could probably go on for another hour on the kinds of things you'll have. But you will see innovation from industry, and you see innovation from industry starting next year, once we get a ruling this year from the FCC allowing us to proceed. And that yields me to just my last point, is that the thing that we'll ultimately get is innovation in consumer usage, right? How people end up using all of this technology, I find I can never predict, because consumers find a way to go use it in all kinds of interesting ways. And that will be the most fun part to watch, because they will take the fact that all these devices can communicate, they have radios, can be part of networks, can join at will, and be able to build things for home, for small businesses, as well as corporate enterprise in a way that we've never seen before. Anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Neeraj.